Genevieve Sinclair's voice was a blade of ice wrapped in silk. Seriously, Briar. The whole world is watching your little performance. What are you going to do now? Call your daddy to come and save you? The plastic fork snapped between Briar Marlowe's fingers. Hundreds of eyes were fixed on her, a mixture of scorn, pity, and a hunger for drama. The air in the Crestview Heights High cafeteria had grown so thick you could cut it with a knife. That was the question. The question that was meant to destroy her. And for an instant, it looked like it had worked. But just as Briar's lips parted for a surrender or a desperate reply, something happened. A hum? Low, deep, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. A vibration that crept up from the soles of their shoes, up their spines, until it rattled their teeth. In seconds, the hum became a deafening roar, a mechanical bellow that shook the very foundations of the school. The fluorescent lights flickered. The windows vibrated so violently they threatened to shatter. Panic erupted. Screams. Students diving under tables. Genevieve's smirk was gone, replaced by a mask of terror and confusion. Then, as suddenly as it began, the noise stopped. In the unnatural silence, broken only by a few frightened sobs, the school's intercom crackled to life with a piercing shriek. And the voice of Principal Caldwell, usually monotonous and steady, came out cracked, almost unrecognizable. The student Briar Marlowe, is to report to the main entrance immediately. But before we find out why, in the middle of all this chaos, they're calling for her. Take a moment to tell us in the comments what city you're watching from. We love reading where our community comes from. And if this story is already keeping you on the edge of your seat, please leave a like and subscribe. It's a tiny gesture for you, but for us, it makes all the difference in the world. And now, prepare yourself. It had all started that morning. Or rather, it had started 3 years ago, but the school had only found out today. Briar Marlowe had stepped off the bus, and the sound of her combat boots on the pavement had created an immediate crack in Crestview's bubble of normalcy. She wore an old M65 Army field jacket, the name Marlowe faded on the name tape above the right pocket. It was so big it hid her slender frame. The jacket seemed to swallow her face, with its fine, almost delicate features, framed by a messy mane of dark hair. Her large, deep brown eyes were almost always fixed on the ground, as if to avoid meeting the world's judgment. It wasn't a costume. It was a relic. The social crucifixion had been swift and methodical. First the whispers, then the open laughter from Genevieve and her lieutenants, Peyton and Kaylee. Someone accidentally bumped her shoulder in the hallway, sending her stumbling. Within minutes, stolen photos had already gone viral on the school's social network. A meme portrayed her with the caption, "When you order a soldier from Wish." Every notification was another small stab. The peak of the humiliation had come in physics class. Gavin Nash, the boy who lived for the crowd's laughter, had pretended to trip, sending Briar's books scattering across the floor. Then, with theatrical timing, he had mimicked the sound of a mortar, whoosh, kaboom, setting off a roar of laughter from the class. Professor Henderson, a man whose career was built on deliberately ignoring anything not written on the blackboard, didn't even turn around. As she bent down to pick up her things, her cheeks burning, her hands hidden in the oversized sleeves, Briar had taken a deep breath. The jacket still smelled faintly of gunpowder, tobacco, and the pine aftershave her father always wore. To everyone else, it was a strange uniform. To her, it was the only way to survive the day. The anniversary. The one day she allowed herself to wear his memory, her grief, her armor. It was a silent ritual, a dialogue with a ghost. And they had turned it into a circus sideshow. And all of this pain and this silent memory, had led her to this table, in the center of the cafeteria. It had led her to that question, thrown by Genevieve like a stone. The cafeteria was completely silent. The phones were up, no longer hidden, but openly recording, ready to capture the final breakdown of the soldier girl. Briar slowly lifted her head. Her eyes, downcast until this moment, met Genevieve's. For the first time that day, there was no fear in her gaze. There was something else. A weariness so profound, so ancient, it seemed to belong to another life. She felt the weight of the jacket on her shoulders, no longer as armor, but as the last thing anchoring her to the world. She opened her mouth. The words formed in her mind. Words that could have explained, words that could have hurt, words that could have freed her. The entire cafeteria held its breath. This was the moment. The moment her silence would break. But the words never came out. Because it was in that instant that the universe decided to speak for her. It was in that instant that the hum began. The hum grew into the roar that had shaken the school. And now, as Briar walked through the silenced hallways, the crowd parting before her as if in reverent fear, the question was on everyone's lips: what did she have to do with that terrifying sound? When she reached the main entrance, she saw through the glass. And she understood. On the sports field, motionless and menacing as a prehistoric beast, sat a Black Hawk helicopter. Its black blades were still. Beside it, figures in dress uniform waited with a discipline that stood in stark contrast to the chaos of high school. The door opened. Waiting for her was Colonel Adrienne Greer. She led Briar outside, toward the field, where the entire school had gathered. Her voice, amplified by a microphone, was calm but sharp as steel. 3 years ago today, she began. In the Kunar province of Afghanistan, a unit was ambushed. Communications were cut. They were condemned. The colonel paused. But one man, Sergeant First Class Elias Marlowe, left the safety of his vehicle. Under enemy fire, he re-established the radio link. He saved 12 lives. The colonel's gaze swept over the crowd. Sergeant Marlowe did not return to that vehicle. He made the ultimate sacrifice. A collective gasp rose from the students. Genevieve covered her mouth with her hand. Her cruel words echoed in her head like a death sentence. Colonel Greer turned to Briar. Every year, his daughter honors this sacrifice in silence. Not to get your attention, but to have his closeness. Today, we are here to honor her. A soldier handed her a wooden box. Inside was the Medal of Honor. As the colonel pinned the medal to the jacket, the uniform looked perfect. The armor had found its knight. Gavin Nash was the first to approach, devastated. I'm an idiot. He was a hero. I'm so sorry. Briar looked at him, without anger. Yes, he was. Then came Genevieve, her mask shattered. Briar. I didn't. Briar cut her off. It wasn't a costume, Genevieve. It was a memory. You just had to ask. The next day, the hallways of Crestview were different. The hostile silence had been replaced by a murmur of awe. Briar was no longer a target, she was a monument. And monuments, seen up close, make people uncomfortable. As she walked to her locker, a younger boy pulled out his phone, trying to steal a picture of her. But before he could press the button, a figure stepped between him and Briar. It was Gavin Nash. Gavin didn't look at the boy. He stared at the phone. Put it away, he said, his voice quiet, but with no trace of yesterday's gesture. Leave her alone. The boy, startled, obeyed. Gavin didn't turn to look for Briar's approval. He didn't say a word. He just continued on his way, leaving a different kind of silence in his wake. A silence no longer made of fear or scorn, but of the beginning of respect. The story of Briar Marlowe and Sergeant Elias Marlowe isn't just the story of a girl and her father. It's a mirror. A mirror that shows us how quickly we judge the cover of a book, without ever bothering to ask what's written inside. It shows us how pride and the fear of what's different can turn us into monsters, making us forget the simplest and most important thing, empathy. Because in the end, what defines a person? The clothes they wear? Or the silent battles they fight every single day, far from the eyes of the world? Briar didn't scream. She didn't seek revenge. She simply carried the weight of her story with dignity, until the truth fell from the sky. And her silence taught someone that real strength isn't making a crowd laugh, but protecting someone who stands alone. This story teaches us a brutal and necessary lesson. Behind every face, there is a story we do not know. And now, we want to hear your voice. Have you ever been unfairly judged? Have you ever witnessed a moment of bullying and regretted saying nothing? Share your experience in the comments. We read every single story. If this video touched you, if you think this message needs to be heard, please leave a like and share it. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss other stories that force us to see the world through different eyes. Thank you for staying with us until the end. Your support is our strength. And remember, you can never know what battle the person in front of you is fighting. Be kind. Always. See you soon.